The pristine architecture of Capitolis pierced the heavens with elegant spires that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Skycraft crisscrossed between the towers, and massive warships hung in geosynchronous orbit above the planet's surface, a constant reminder of the galactic empire's might. The cityscape was a perfect blend of technology and artistry, a testament to humanity's achievement under the careful guidance of the Empire. Inside the Central Command Tower, General Castor Valen stood before the High Council, shoulders squared, chin lifted in the proper military posture that had served him well during his 20-year career. His gray uniform bore the insignia of a distinguished officer who had earned every medal and commendation through loyalty and dedication to the Empire. Reports from the Outer Rim suggest a new faction operating in the shadows, he reported, his deep voice carrying across the marble chamber. Small skirmishes have been reported on Kelvin 6 and Narrows Minor. High Admiral Tethys waved a dismissive hand. Insurgents and pirates have always been present in the outer systems. They lack the resources and coordination to pose any significant threat. With all due respect, Admiral, Valen persisted, these attacks demonstrate unusual precision and technology. The weapons' signatures don't match any known rebel factions. You always were cautious to a fault, Castor, said Military Governor Elton with a thin smile. That's why you're still just a general after all these years. The Outer Rim has always been unruly. Send a destroyer squadron to make an example of whichever system is harboring these. What are they calling themselves? They don't identify themselves, Valen replied. Local witnesses describe soldiers in black armor with an insignia resembling a veiled face. Intelligence has provisionally labeled them the Veiled Legion. Laughter rippled through the chamber. How dramatic, Governor Elton said. Very well. Crush this theatrical band of malcontents and be done with it. Valen bowed stiffly and exited the chamber, his unease growing with each step. The council's dismissal felt like a familiar mistake, one the Empire had made before with smaller rebellions that eventually grew to cause significant damage. While the Empire's elite debated in their marble towers, life in the Outer Rim continued at a markedly different pace. On Valora Prime, a small trading outpost had formed around a former mining colony. The air smelled of engine oil, exotic spices, and the distinctive scent of ozone from aging power generators. Merchants shouted prices for used ship parts and imported goods, while patrons of various species haggled with practiced enthusiasm. Freya Eldris moved through the marketplace with the careful awareness of someone accustomed to watching her back. Her dark hair was pulled into a practical knot, and her nondescript brown jacket and cargo pants helped her blend into the crowd. Nothing about her current appearance suggested she had once worn the sleek uniform of an Imperial patrol pilot. She paused at a stall selling reconditioned ship components, her expert eye-catching subtle defects in the merchandise that the average buyer might miss. That thruster coupling would last maybe 2 jumps before failing, she commented to the Novarian merchant, who bristled at her assessment. You have keen eyes for a drifter, the merchant replied, his tentacles twitching with annoyance. Maybe you'd prefer this instead. He reached below the counter and produced a navigation computer module that was clearly military grade, and almost certainly stolen. Freya kept her expression neutral. Too rich for my blood, she said, even as her mind calculated the implications. Imperial technology, finding its way to black markets, meant patrol routes were being compromised or supply ships were being raided. She continued through the market, purchasing small items to maintain her cover while gathering information. The conversations around her were filled with the usual complaints about imperial taxation and the rising cost of fuel cells. But there was something new. Whispers about ships disappearing near the Jaspis sector, and strange black vessels that moved without standard engine signatures. Heard they hit an imperial outpost, a weather-beaten spacer was saying to his companion. Cut through their defenses like they weren't even there. Empire saying it was just pirates, his friend replied, voice lowered. Since when do pirates have pulse cannons that could disable a station's shields in one volley? Freya's stride faltered for just a moment before she forced herself to keep moving. If someone was using advanced weapon technology against Imperial targets, the situation was more serious than typical Outer Rim unrest. As she made her way back to her rented room above a repair shop, she mentally reviewed her options. She had left the Empire 3 years ago after witnessing a pacification operation that had left an entire settlement in ruins, all because they had refused to surrender their water rights to an Imperial mining corporation. The memory still haunted her, along with the faces of the civilians she had unwittingly helped to monitor from her patrol craft. She had promised herself, then, that she would never again be part of such brutality. But if a new conflict was brewing, people like the merchants and workers of Allura Prime would be caught in the crossfire, regardless of which side they chose. Inside her small room, Freya accessed a hidden compartment in her rucksack and removed a compact communications device. Not Imperial issue, but something she had acquired through less legal channels. She stared at it for a long moment, wondering if it was time to contact the few former colleagues she still trusted. Before she could decide, a series of explosions shook the building, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Rushing to the window, she saw smoke rising from the landing pads at the edge of the settlement. The distinctive whine of Imperial dropships filled the air, and the flash of weapons fire cut through the evening gloom. The Empire had arrived on Allura Prime. The question was, were they here to protect it or to make an example of it? Rook Damar's hands were deep in the guts of an atmospheric regulator when the first explosion hit. The impact sent tools scattering across his workshop floor, and he cursed as he pulled himself free of the machinery. At 32, Rook had spent most of his life fixing things that others had broken or abandoned. His tall frame was lean but strong from years of physical labor, and his dark skin bore the marks of countless minor accidents, the unavoidable consequences of working with temperamental technology. "What in blazes was that?" he muttered, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag as he moved to the window. The sight that greeted him made his stomach sink. Imperial troopers were disembarking from transport ships, their white armor gleaming in the harsh light of the landing pad's floodlights. Officers barked orders, and civilians scattered like insects under a sudden light. Rook knew what an Imperial inspection meant. They would seize whatever they wanted, impose fines for imaginary infractions, and leave the settlement poorer and more desperate than before. He had seen it happen on a dozen worlds across the Outer Rim. Grabbing his toolkit, he headed for the door. If the Empire was throwing its weight around, people would need help securing their valuables or repairing damage left in the wake of the troopers' heavy boots. Outside, the atmosphere had transformed from the usual market day bustle to tense apprehension. Imperial troops moved through the streets in formation, their weapons ready. A squad approached the popular trading post, where many off-worlders gathered to exchange news and goods. "Clear the area," the squad leader announced through his helmet speaker. "By order of Imperial Command, this establishment is to be searched for contraband and suspected insurgent activity." The owner, a heavy-set woman named Mira who had run the place for 20 years, stepped forward. "On what grounds?" "We've paid our taxes and have all the proper licenses." The lead trooper stepped closer, towering over her. "New intelligence suggests this location is a meeting point for anti-Imperial elements. Cooperate or face detention." Mira stood her ground, but Rook could see the fear in her eyes. Before he could intervene, an Imperial officer shoved past her and signaled his men to enter the building. The troops began roughly overturning furniture and breaking open storage containers. "These are my livelihood," Mira protested as bottles of rare spirits shattered on the floor. The officer ignored her pleas. "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." Rook moved closer, his toolkit clutched tightly in his hand. What he planned to do, he wasn't entirely sure, but he couldn't stand by while the Empire destroyed a woman's life's work. As he approached, he noticed one of the troopers struggling with his weapon. The power pack was emitting a distinctive whine that indicated an overload condition. With a swift movement, Rook stepped forward. "Your weapon's about to backfire," he warned, pointing to the glowing power indicator. "That model has a known defect in the heat sink assembly." The trooper hesitated, then quickly ejected the power pack moments before it would have vented superheated plasma into the weapon's firing chamber, and likely into the trooper's hands. "You should have that checked by a qualified technician," Rook added, his tone deliberately casual as he kept his eyes down, avoiding direct challenge. The officer turned his attention to Rook. "Who are you to advise Imperial troops on their equipment?" "Just a mechanic," Rook replied, shrugging. "I've seen that malfunction before. Nasty business when it happens inside a populated area." The officer studied him suspiciously, but before he could respond, a shadow passed overhead, followed by the distinctive sound of non-Imperial engines. All eyes turned skyward as 3 sleek black ships descended toward the settlement's main square. The Imperial troops immediately redirected their attention, forming a defensive perimeter as the mysterious craft landed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's hatches opened and figures emerged, soldiers in black armor with sophisticated weapons unlike anything Rook had seen before. Each helmet bore a subtle insignia that resembled a veiled face. "Empire forces," an amplified voice called from the lead figure. "You are operating in neutral territory against the terms of the Outer Rim Autonomy Treaty. Withdraw immediately." The Imperial officer stepped forward, his posture rigid with indignation. "This planet falls under Imperial protection and jurisdiction. Identify yourselves immediately or be treated as hostile forces." Instead of responding verbally, the black-armored soldiers raised their weapons in perfect unison. What followed was not the expected exchange of blaster fire, but something far more precise. Each Imperial weapon emitted a shower of sparks as its power systems were disabled by some invisible force. Confusion rippled through the Imperial ranks. Several troops attempted to fire anyway, but their weapons remained inert. The black-armored soldiers advanced, their movements coordinated with machine-like precision. "This is your final warning," the amplified voice stated. "Withdraw from Valora Prime." The Imperial officer, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment, reached for his communicator. "This is Captain Drent requesting immediate reinforcements. We are under attack by hostile forces with advanced technology." The response was immediate. From the upper atmosphere, an Imperial light cruiser appeared, its weapons systems already charging. The black-armored soldiers looked up, and, after a brief pause, their leader made a quick gesture. As one, they retreated to their ships, which lifted off with remarkable speed and vanished into the clouds before the Imperial cruiser could target them. Captain Drent's expression shifted from alarm to smug satisfaction. "Cowards," he sneered. "They flee at the first sign of real Imperial power." Rook slowly backed away from the scene, his mind racing. Those soldiers hadn't been ordinary rebels or pirates. Their technology, their coordination, it spoke of resources and training far beyond typical anti-Imperial groups. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of a woman watching from the shadows. The same woman he had noticed earlier in the marketplace. The one with the observant eyes and the way of moving that reminded him of military training. Their gazes met briefly, and he saw in her expression the same uneasy recognition he felt. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't over. It felt more like the opening move in a much larger game. Within hours, Imperial reinforcements had arrived in force. Dropships and fighters swarmed around Valora Prime, and a detachment of stormtroopers established checkpoints throughout the settlement. The Empire was making a show of strength, but to Freya's experienced eye, there was something performative about it, as if they were more concerned with appearance than actual security. From her vantage point atop a storage facility, she watched as Imperial officers gathered in the main square, reviewing tactical displays and issuing orders. Among them was a distinguished figure she recognized immediately. General Castor Valen, one of the few high-ranking officers known for his reluctance to use excessive force. His presence here was significant. The Empire was taking this incident more seriously than their public posture suggested. A commotion drew her attention to a side street where Imperial troops were escorting several captured figures in black armor, members of the mysterious force that had briefly challenged Imperial authority. The prisoners moved with the same eerie coordination she had observed during the confrontation, despite being bound and surrounded by armed guards. "They're not even trying to escape," a voice said from behind her. Freya spun around, hand instinctively moving to the concealed blaster at her hip, then relaxed slightly when she recognized the mechanic from earlier. "You have a habit of appearing where the action is," she observed, keeping her voice neutral. "So do you," he replied, stepping forward to get a better view of the proceedings below. "Rook Damar. I fix things around here. Freya Eldris. I try to avoid breaking things." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Former Imperial pilot, if I'm not mistaken. The way you tracked those ships during the skirmish, that's not civilian training." She tensed. "That was a long time ago." "I'm not judging," Rook said, raising his hand slightly. "We've all got pasts we'd rather not discuss. Right now, I'm more concerned about what's happening to my home." Below them, General Valen was addressing his officers. Though they couldn't hear his words, his gestures suggested he was outlining a defense strategy. Occasionally, he would glance at the captured soldiers with what appeared to be genuine concern. "They're celebrating too soon," Freya murmured. "Those black ships. They didn't retreat because they were outmatched. They left because they'd accomplished whatever they came to do." Rook nodded slowly. "I noticed that too. They disabled Imperial weapons without firing a shot, demonstrated superior technology, then disappeared before taking any casualties. Classic shock and awe tactics. Followed by a strategic withdrawal," Freya added. "Almost like they were testing defenses," Rook finished her thought, gathering intelligence on response times and capabilities. Their eyes met, a moment of mutual understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening extended far beyond a simple border skirmish or local rebellion. In the square below, the Imperial officers concluded their meeting. Troops began deploying throughout the settlement in greater numbers, establishing defensive positions and scanning the skies with high-powered sensors. General Valen personally oversaw the transport of the captured soldiers to a secure holding facility. "The Empire thinks they've won a victory here," Freya said quietly. "But I can't shake the feeling we've only seen the opening move." Rook's expression darkened. "If that's true, then Valora Prime is about to become a battlefield. I need to know more about these Veiled Legion soldiers," Freya decided. "Their technology, their objectives. I might be able to help with that," Rook offered. "I've been working on a ship, nothing fancy, but it's space-worthy and off Imperial registry. If you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll need transport." Freya studied him for a moment, weighing his offer against the risk of trusting someone she barely knew. But something in his steady gaze suggested reliability, a mechanic's practical approach to problems that needed solving. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't know me, and getting involved in this could be dangerous." Rook gestured toward the settlement below. "These people are my neighbors. I built a life here. If war is coming, I want to do more than just wait for it to destroy everything I care about." His words resonated with her own unacknowledged feelings. She had been drifting for 3 years, avoiding attachment, telling herself she was protecting others by keeping her distance. But perhaps it was time to stop running. "All right," she said finally, "but we need to move quickly. Once the Empire finishes processing those prisoners, they'll realize what we already suspect. This was just a reconnaissance mission. I'll need a few hours to prepare the ship," Rook replied. "Meet me at Docking Bay 9 after curfew." As they parted ways, Freya cast one last glance at the Imperial forces below. General Valen was still there, his posture rigid, but somehow troubled as he watched his troops secure the area. For a moment, she felt a pang of something like sympathy. If her suspicions were correct, the general was about to face an enemy unlike any the Empire had encountered before, and he didn't even know it yet. Far above Valora Prime, in the sterile conference room of the Imperial command ship Indomitable, General Castor Valen reviewed the interrogation reports with growing concern. The captured soldiers had offered no resistance, answered questions with mechanical precision, and demonstrated an unsettling lack of fear or emotion. "Their responses are too consistent," he told his senior officers, almost as if they were programmed. Colonel Thalen, his intelligence chief, nodded grimly. "Medical scans show extensive neural implants, beyond anything in our database." and their armor contains communication technology that's still actively transmitting despite our jamming efforts. Transmitting to whom? Valen asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We don't know yet, Thalen admitted, but we're detecting similar signals from multiple sectors. Whatever this Veiled Legion is, today's encounter was just one small part of their operation. Valen turned to the viewport, gazing at the stars beyond. In his 20 years of service, he had faced rebels, pirates, and would-be warlords. He had always believed in the Empire's mission to maintain order and stability, even when he questioned some of its methods. But this new threat felt different, calculated, patient, and possessing technology that outmatched Imperial capabilities. Prepare a full report for Capitalese, he ordered. Mark it Priority Alpha, and double the security around the prisoners. I want to know who they are, where they came from, and what they're planning. As his officers hurried to comply, Valen remained at the viewport, a nagging doubt growing in his mind. The Empire had grown complacent, relying on its size and established power rather than innovation and adaptation. If this new force had been planning in secret, developing advanced technology while the Empire focused on maintaining the status quo, they might be facing a threat greater than anyone in the High Council was prepared to acknowledge. For the first time in his career, Castor Valen felt something he had never expected to experience while wearing an Imperial uniform: fear. Under the cover of darkness, Freya made her way to Docking Bay 9, avoiding Imperial patrols with the ease of someone who had once helped design their rotation schedules. The settlement had changed since the Empire's arrival. Doors were locked that had never been secured before, windows were shuttered, and the usual nighttime gatherings had been replaced by tense silence. When she reached the designated bay, she found Rook making final adjustments to what could charitably be described as a functional spacecraft. The Stardust, as its faded hull markings identified it, was a modified light freighter that had clearly been assembled from parts of several different vessels. "Don't let appearances fool you," Rook said, noticing her skeptical expression. "She's got a refurbished Corellian hyperdrive and modified sensor deflectors. She may not look pretty, but she'll get us where we need to go without attracting attention." "Which is where exactly?" Freya asked, stowing her pack in a storage compartment. "Outpost 7, Rook replied. "It's a neutral station in the Meridian sector. I have a contact there, Dr. Eliana Chorus, former Imperial weapons researcher. If anyone can help us understand the technology these Veiled Legion soldiers are using, it's her." Freya raised an eyebrow. "An Imperial scientist helping rebels?" "She's not exactly a rebel sympathizer," Rook explained as he guided her through the ship's compact interior. "She left the Empire when they began developing planetary-scale weapons. She's been working independently ever since, studying defensive technologies." The ship's interior was surprisingly well-maintained compared to its exterior. The cockpit was clean and functional, with updated navigation systems and what appeared to be custom-built communication equipment. "Do you always keep an escape ship ready?" Freya asked as they settled into the pilot and co-pilot seats. Rook's hands moved confidently over the controls, initiating the pre-flight sequence. "Let's just say I've learned that options are valuable in uncertain times." The engines hummed to life, a smooth, well-tuned sound that spoke of careful maintenance. As Rook guided the ship through the departure procedures, Freya monitored the Imperial communication channels, ready to alert him to any complications. "Imperial Patrol is changing shifts," she noted. "We have a 3-minute window with reduced surveillance." Rook nodded and accelerated smoothly out of the docking bay. The Stardust rose through Valora Prime's atmosphere with minimal vibration, a testament to Rook's skill as a mechanic despite the ship's hodgepodge appearance. Once they cleared the gravity well, Rook engaged the hyperdrive, and the stars elongated into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. The tension in the cockpit eased slightly as the immediate danger of Imperial pursuit receded. "It'll be about 6 hours to Outpost 7. Rook said, leaning back in his seat. "You should get some rest. I'll take the first watch." Freya nodded, but made no move to leave the cockpit. Instead, she gazed out at the swirling patterns of hyperspace, lost in thought. "You're worried about Valora Prime," Rook observed. I'm worried about a lot of things, she admitted. I've spent 3 years trying to distance myself from the Empire's conflicts, and now I'm flying straight into what could be the beginning of a galactic war. Rook studied her profile for a moment. Why did you leave the Empire? Freya was silent for so long that he thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I was a patrol pilot assigned to the Caliban system. It was a routine mission, monitoring a settlement that had been refusing to comply with Imperial resource quotas. I reported unusual activity, civilian gatherings that looked like they might be planning resistance. She paused, her jaw tightening. The Empire sent in troops to maintain order. What I didn't know was that they had already decided to make an example of the settlement. They didn't just arrest the leaders, they destroyed the entire colony. Thousands of people, gone in an afternoon. Rook's expression grew somber. That's why you watch from the shadows now. I thought staying uninvolved would keep my conscience clear, she said. But watching the Empire abuse its power on Valora Prime today, I realized that neutrality is its own kind of complicity. The conversation lapsed into silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the ship hurtled through hyperspace. Eventually, Freya did retire to one of the small sleeping quarters, though her rest was fitful, filled with dreams of black ships and veiled faces. Several hours later, they emerged from hyperspace near Outpost 7, a sprawling space station that served as a neutral port for traders, researchers, and others seeking to operate outside Imperial jurisdiction. The station's central hub was surrounded by extending arms that housed various facilities: research laboratories, commercial areas, residential quarters, and docking bays. As they approached, a transmission came through the communication system. Unidentified vessel. This is Outpost 7 security. State your business and prepare for scan. Rook activated the response channel. Outpost 7. This is the Stardust requesting permission to dock. We're here to consult with Dr. Eliana Heiress on a technical matter. Security code Tango Echo 37. There was a brief pause before the reply came. Security code confirmed. Proceed to docking bay 17. Be advised that all weapons must be declared upon entry. Rook guided the ship to the designated bay with practiced ease. After securing the vessel, they made their way through the station's bustling corridors. Outpost 7 was a melting pot of species and cultures, with a noticeably absent Imperial presence. Instead, security was handled by a private force that maintained order without the Empire's heavy-handed approach. Dr. Eliana Heiress's laboratory was located in a quiet section of the station's research arm. The entrance was unmarked save for a small plaque that bore her name and the words Applied Physics and Engineering Consultation. Rook pressed the entry chime, and after a moment, the door slid open to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical style. Her sharp eyes assessed them quickly before she stepped aside to allow them entry. Rook Damar, she said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of the Imperial core worlds. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. And you brought company. Dr. Heiress, Rook greeted her. This is Freya Eldris. We need your expertise on a matter of some urgency. The laboratory beyond was immaculately organized, with workstations dedicated to various projects and holographic displays showing complex equations and technical schematics. Dr. Heiress led them to a seating area separated from the main workspace by a privacy screen. I assume this is about the incident on Valora Prime, she said once they were seated. News travels quickly, even to isolated research stations. Freya leaned forward. You've heard about the Veiled Legion? Dr. Heiress's expression grew serious. Not just heard. I've been tracking their activities for months. Unusual energy signatures, advanced communications, weapons technology that doesn't match any known manufacturer. She activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy with several points illuminated. These are locations where similar signatures have been detected. Notice the pattern. They're establishing presence in strategic positions throughout the outer rim, always in areas where Imperial control is tenuous. Preparing for invasion? Rook suggested. Dr. Heiress shook her head. More complex than that. Based on the data I've gathered, they're creating a neural network, linking their forces through a form of collective consciousness supported by advanced implant technology. Freya felt a chill run through her. The soldiers we encountered moved with unnatural coordination, and they didn't show any fear. Because they're not acting as individuals, Dr. Chorus confirmed. They're extensions of a central intelligence, drones, essentially, though with far more autonomy than simple remote control. Is it some kind of artificial intelligence? Rook asked. Not artificial, no. Based on the energy patterns, I believe it's an organic consciousness distributed across multiple hosts, a collective mind directing individual bodies. The implications were staggering. Freya tried to comprehend what they were facing. So, when the Empire captured those soldiers on Valora Prime, they captured bodies, Dr. Chorus finished for her, but the consciousness controlling them remains intact. And more importantly, it gathered valuable data about Imperial response protocols and weaponry. We need to warn the Empire, Freya said, surprising herself with the words. Whatever their flaws, they're not prepared for this kind of threat. Dr. Chorus's expression darkened. I tried 6 months ago. I sent my research to former colleagues in Imperial intelligence. They dismissed it as theoretical speculation without military application. The Empire's arrogance will be its downfall, Rook said grimly. Before anyone could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station, followed by an automated announcement. Security alert. Unidentified vessels approaching. All residents please proceed to designated safety areas. They rushed to the laboratory's viewport in time to see 3 black ships, identical to those that had appeared on Valora Prime, approaching the station. Behind them, dropping out of hyperspace, came an Imperial cruiser. They followed us, Freya realized with horror. Not you, Dr. Chorus said, her voice tense. They were already coming here, both of them. This station houses one of the largest independent research communities in the sector. It's a natural target. As they watched, the black ships deployed smaller craft that headed directly for the station's research arm. The Imperial cruiser launched fighters in pursuit, but the black vessels were faster, easily evading the Imperial attacks. We need to go, Rook said urgently. If they're targeting research facilities... My work, Dr. Chorus nodded, already moving to a console. I need to secure my data. Give me 2 minutes. While the doctor worked rapidly to transfer her research to portable storage devices, Freya monitored the situation outside. The Veiled Legion ships had docked at access points near the research wing, and Imperial forces were deploying to intercept them. The Empire's response is too slow, she observed. The Legion will get what they came for and be gone before Imperial troops can engage. Dr. Chorus finished her work and handed Rook a small data module. Everything I've learned about the Veiled Legion is in there, including my theory about their ultimate goal, which is, Freya asked as they hurried toward the exit. Total cognitive dominance, Dr. Chorus replied grimly. Their technology isn't just for communication, it's for assimilation. They don't just want to defeat the Empire, they want to absorb it. They had barely reached the corridor when the station shuddered violently. Emergency lights activated as the main power fluctuated. They're attacking the central core, Dr. Chorus said. We need to reach your ship now. The journey back to the docking bay became a harrowing ordeal as they navigated through panicked crowds and areas where artificial gravity had failed. Twice they had to detour around sections where security forces were engaged with black armored Legion soldiers. By the time they reached the Stardust, the station was in chaos. Through the viewport, they could see Imperial troops being overwhelmed by Legion forces that moved with that same uncanny coordination. What should have been a straightforward security operation was turning into a rout. Rook worked quickly to prepare the ship for departure, while Freya monitored the battle outside. Dr. Chorus studied the data module, her expression growing increasingly troubled. What is it? Freya asked, noticing her concern. These attack patterns, Dr. Chorus said, they're identical to the ones used on Valora Prime, but scaled up for a larger target. It's as if they're running the same tactical program with different parameters. Like a test, Rook suggested as he completed the pre-flight sequence. They're refining their approach with each engagement. As the Stardust detached from the docking bay, they witnessed the Imperial cruiser unleashing its full firepower against the Legion ships. For a moment, it seemed like the Empire might prevail through sheer force. Then, with synchronized precision, the Legion vessels released a pulse of energy that disabled the cruiser's weapon systems. "Did you see that?" Freya exclaimed. "They just neutralized an Imperial capital ship with a single attack." Dr. Chorus nodded grimly. The same technology they used on a smaller scale against the troopers' weapons on Valora Prime. "I suspected they could scale it up, but I didn't think they'd have a ship-based version ready so soon." As they navigated away from the battle, a transmission cut through their communication channel, a message being broadcast to all frequencies. "Imperial forces," a flat, synthesized voice announced. "Your resistance is inefficient. What you have witnessed is merely a fraction of our capabilities. We are the Veiled Legion, and we are everywhere." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. "Set course for Capitolese," Freya decided. "We need to speak with General Valen directly." Rook looked at her in surprise. "You want to go to the Imperial capital? That's suicide for a deserter." "We don't have a choice," Freya insisted. "What we just saw wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The Legion is showing the Empire just enough of their capabilities to provoke a response, but they're holding back their true strength. If we don't warn them, they'll walk right into a trap." After a moment of consideration, Rook nodded and entered the coordinates for Capitolese. As the Stardust jumped to hyperspace, leaving the chaos of Outpost 7 behind, Freya couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The Legion's message had been too confident, too calculated. Whatever game they were playing, they were several moves ahead. When they emerged from hyperspace near Capitolese days later, the scene that greeted them was one of unprecedented military mobilization. The space around the Imperial capital was crowded with warships of every class, from nimble corvettes to massive dreadnoughts. Fighter squadrons maintained constant patrol patterns, and orbital defense platforms bristled with weapons systems on high alert. "I've never seen security this tight," Freya commented as they approached. Not even during the Rim insurrection. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Within moments of their appearance, they were surrounded by a squadron of Imperial fighters, their weapons locked on the Stardust. "Unidentified vessel," came the stern voice of the squadron leader. "You have entered restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Freya opened a communication channel. "Imperial Control, this is Freya Eldris requesting direct communication with General Castor Valen. Security code Echo Bravo 729. There was a pause, then transmitting security code. "Stand by." The tense minutes that followed felt like hours as they waited, surrounded by Imperial fighters with weapons trained on their small vessel. Finally, the communication channel activated again. Security code authenticated. "You are cleared for approach to Military Docking Station 3. Deviation from assigned flight path will result in immediate termination." The fighter escort adjusted formation, guiding them toward a massive structure extending from the primary Imperial defense ring that encircled Capitolese. As they drew closer, the sheer scale of the Imperial military presence became even more apparent. Ships of all sizes were being armed and provisioned, and the activity levels suggested preparation for a major operation. "They're mobilizing for war," Dr. Chorus observed quietly. Rook guided the Stardust to the designated docking port with careful precision. "Let's hope they're preparing for the right enemy." Upon landing, they were met by a full squad of Imperial security officers led by a stern-faced commander who wasted no time with pleasantries. "Freya Eldris, you are wanted for desertion from Imperial service," he announced. "You and your companions will surrender all weapons and follow me immediately." "We have critical information for General Valen," Freya insisted. "Information about the Veiled Legion." At the mention of the Legion, the commander's expression shifted subtly. "Follow me. The general will determine what happens to you after debriefing." They were escorted through a series of high-security checkpoints, their every movement tracked by surveillance systems and armed guards. The Imperial military complex was a stark contrast to the chaotic warmth of Valora Prime or the academic atmosphere of Outpost 7. Everything here was ordered, efficient, and cold. Eventually, they were brought to a secure briefing room where General Castor Valen awaited them. The general looked older than when Freya had last seen him, the strain of recent events evident in the new lines around his eyes. Former Flight Officer Heiress. He acknowledged her with a nod. When your security code appeared in our system, I almost couldn't believe it. You disappeared quite thoroughly 3 years ago. I had my reasons, General, Freya replied evenly. I'm aware of the circumstances surrounding your departure, Valen said, surprising her. The Caliban incident was regrettable, but we have more pressing matters now. He turned his attention to Freya's companions. You must be the mechanic for Valora Prime. And you are. Dr. Eliana Chorus, the scientist, introduced herself. Former Imperial Research Division. Recognition flickered in Valen's eyes. The neural network specialist. Your theories on distributed consciousness systems were quite ahead of their time. And now they're being weaponized against the Empire, Dr. Chorus stated bluntly. General Valen's expression hardened. Tell me everything you know about the Veiled Legion. For the next hour, they shared their observations and Dr. Chorus's research. The general listened intently, asking occasional questions, but mostly absorbing the information with growing concern. This aligns with what we've learned from the prisoners taken on Valora Prime, he said when they had finished. Their neural implants are unlike anything our scientists have seen, capable of receiving and transmitting vast amounts of data while maintaining individual motor function. They're not really individuals anymore, Dr. Chorus emphasized. They're extensions of a collective consciousness, drones that retain just enough autonomy to function effectively in combat. Valen activated a holographic display showing multiple sectors of space where Imperial forces had engaged the Legion. In the past week, we've recorded over 30 separate encounters. Each one followed the same pattern. Precise strikes against military targets, displays of superior technology, then tactical withdrawal before we could mount an effective response. They're testing your defenses, Freya said, gathering data on Imperial tactics while revealing just enough of their capabilities to provoke a reaction. The High Council has authorized a full military response, Valen acknowledged. We're deploying fleet elements to every affected sector with orders to crush this threat before it can spread further. Rook leaned forward. General, with respect, that's exactly what they want. They're baiting you into dispersing your forces. I'm well aware of the risk, Valen replied, his voice tight. I've advised a more cautious approach, but after what happened at Outpost 7, the Council believes overwhelming force is our only option. What happened after we left? Dr. Chorus asked. Valen's expression darkened. The Legion disabled our cruiser, extracted targeted data from the research facilities, then withdrew, but not before broadcasting their message throughout the sector. The same message has appeared on communication networks across a dozen worlds. This is merely a fraction of our capabilities. Because it is, Freya said quietly. General, you need to understand, the force you're preparing to engage isn't their main army. It's a reconnaissance unit. That's absurd, Valen countered, though his tone lacked conviction. Our intelligence suggests they have perhaps 50 vessels total, with limited ground forces. Dr. Chorus activated her data module, projecting a series of energy signature patterns. These readings indicate communication relays in at least 20 sectors beyond the Outer Rim, sectors the Empire has never explored. Based on the frequency and intensity of these transmissions, I estimate their actual fleet size is at least 10 times what you've encountered. The color drained from Valen's face as he studied the data. If these readings are accurate, the Empire is about to walk into a trap, Rook finished for him. Before Valen could respond, his communication device activated. General, priority alert from the Jaspie sector. The Veiled Legion has appeared in force. 3 Imperial destroyers are reporting critical systems failure. Valen's posture stiffened as he returned to the composed military leader Freya, remembered. Continue monitoring. I'll join the command center shortly. He turned back to them. If what you're saying is true, we need to reconsider our entire strategy. The Legion's primary advantage is their neural network, Dr. Chorus said. If we could disrupt it, we might be able to sever the connection between the central consciousness and its drones. How? Valen asked. I have theories, but I need access to Imperial research facilities to develop a practical solution. Valen hesitated only briefly before making his decision. You'll have it. All three of you will be granted temporary security clearance and assigned quarters in the secure sector. He looked specifically at Freya. This supersedes any outstanding warrants for your arrest, but don't mistake it for a pardon. Understood, General, Freya replied, relief mingling with apprehension. They had delivered their warning, but now they were committed to the Empire's fight, a fight that might already be lost. As they were escorted to their assigned quarters, emergency alerts began sounding throughout the military complex. Through viewport windows, they could see ships being scrambled for immediate deployment. They're still sending forces to the outer sectors, Rook observed grimly. The Empire can't change course that quickly, Freya replied. Bureaucracy and pride will keep them committed to their original plan until the evidence of failure becomes impossible to ignore. By which time, it may be too late, Dr. Chorus added. In the quiet of their quarters, with Imperial alarms sounding in the distance, the reality of their situation settled over them. They had fled from one battle only to find themselves at the center of a much larger conflict, one that threatened not just the Empire, but potentially all independent consciousness in the galaxy. For the next 3 days, they worked tirelessly alongside Imperial scientists and strategists. Dr. Chorus led the research effort to develop a counter to the Legion's neural network, while Freya provided insight into Imperial tactical vulnerabilities that the Legion might exploit. Rook, with his practical understanding of technology, helped bridge the gap between theoretical models and functional applications. Meanwhile, reports from the outer sectors grew increasingly dire. Imperial forces were engaging Legion elements across multiple fronts, but the pattern was consistent: initial success, followed by catastrophic reversal as the Legion deployed technologies that rendered Imperial weapons and defenses obsolete. On the third day, they were summoned to the primary command center, a vast chamber filled with tactical displays and communication stations. The atmosphere was tense, with officers moving with the brisk efficiency of those aware that time was running out. General Valen met them at the entrance, his face grave. We've lost contact with the Third Fleet in the Jaspis sector. Before communications failed, they reported encountering Legion vessels unlike any we've seen before, massive carriers deploying hundreds of fighter craft with advanced propulsion systems. Their main force, Freya realized. Valen nodded grimly. It appears you were right. What we've been fighting was merely their advance units. He led them to a central holographic display showing the known galaxy. Red indicators marked areas of Legion activity, forming a pattern that was now unmistakable. They were methodically cutting off Capitoles from its outer territories. They're isolating the capital, Rook observed, while gathering data on our response capabilities from each engagement, Dr. Chorus added. Valen gestured to a communications officer, who activated a recorded transmission. The image of an Imperial commander appeared, his uniform disheveled and his expression one of barely controlled panic. This is Captain Neril of the Imperial destroyer Steadfast, the recording began. The veiled Legion forces we engaged. They're not what we expected. Their ships adapt to our attack patterns, neutralizing our strategies faster than we can implement them. It's as if they're learning collectively in real time. The transmission deteriorated into static before clearing again. Their weapons are bypassing our shields as if they're not even there. And they keep broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. Your resistance is inefficient. They want us to know that they're holding back, that this is just... The captain's words were cut off as the transmission ended abruptly. A heavy silence fell over the command center, broken only by the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the hushed exchanges of officers at their stations. How much time do we have? Freya asked quietly. At their current rate of advance, Valen replied, they'll reach Capitoles within 48 hours. Dr. Chorus stepped forward. General, I believe we've developed a potential countermeasure. It's experimental, but the theory is sound. She activated her data module, displaying schematics for a device that would generate a specific frequency designed to disrupt the Legion's neural network. The implants they use operate on a quantum entanglement principle, she explained. This transmitter would create a cascade failure in their communication system, temporarily severing the connection between the central consciousness and its drones. Temporarily? Valen questioned. The disruption would last approximately 30 minutes before their system could adapt, Dr. Chorus admitted. But it would give us a window of opportunity. To do what? Rook asked. Even without their neural network, their technology is still superior to ours. Freya had been studying the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. We don't need to defeat their entire force, she said slowly. We just need to locate and neutralize their command structure, the source of the collective consciousness. And how do you propose we do that? Valen asked. By giving them exactly what they expect, Freya replied. A predictable Imperial response that draws their attention while a smaller team penetrates their defenses. The plan that emerged over the next hours was desperate, but built on sound tactical principles. The Imperial fleet would mount a conventional defense of Capitolese, creating the appearance of a last stand. Meanwhile, a small, specialized team would use the disruption of the Legion's neural network to infiltrate their command vessel and disable the source of their collective consciousness. The key components of Dr. Chorus's disruptor were rushed into production, and an elite squad of Imperial Special Forces was assembled for the mission. To everyone's surprise, General Valen insisted on leading the operation personally. The Empire's leadership has retreated to secure bunkers, he explained when Freya questioned his decision. They're already preparing for defeat. I can't in good conscience send others on this mission while I hide behind the walls of Capitolese. As preparations continued, Freya found herself on an observation deck overlooking the massive Imperial shipyards. Hundreds of vessels were being readied for what might be the Empire's final battle. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, the culmination of centuries of military development, perhaps about to be rendered obsolete in a single engagement. She sensed rather than heard Rook's approach, his footsteps nearly silent despite his size. Quite a view, he commented, joining her at the railing. All this power, Freya said quietly, and it might not be enough. It never was about power, Rook replied. The Empire built bigger ships, stronger weapons, more efficient engines, but they forgot about the people inside them. They treated worlds like resources to be exploited rather than communities to be protected. That's why I stayed on Valora Prime instead of seeking fortune elsewhere, because their people still mattered to each other. Freya nodded, understanding what he was saying. The Legion doesn't value individuality either, but for different reasons. The Empire suppresses it. The Legion eliminates it entirely. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Rook spoke again. Dr. Chorus wants us on the infiltration team. Freya turned to him in surprise. Us? I thought Valen would use his special forces. He is, Rook confirmed. But Dr. Chorus convinced him that we bring unique perspectives. Your knowledge of Imperial systems that the Legion might have co-opted, and my ability to improvise with unfamiliar technology. She'll remain on Capitolese to coordinate the disruptor activation. This is suicide, you know, Freya said, but there was no fear in her voice, only the calm acceptance of a pilot calculating necessary risks. Rook's smile was gentle. Probably, but staying here definitely is. The preparation for the mission consumed the remaining hours before the Legion's anticipated arrival. They trained with the Special Forces team, familiarizing themselves with the latest Imperial equipment and reviewing what little intelligence existed about the Legion's command vessels. In the final briefing session, General Valen addressed the assembled team with characteristic directness. What we attempt today has never been done before. We will be facing an enemy with superior technology, coordinated by a consciousness that thinks and reacts at speeds we can barely comprehend. Our only advantages are Dr. Chorus's disruptor and the element of surprise. He paused, his gaze moving from one face to another. I cannot promise any of you will return from this mission. What I can promise is that without your sacrifice, billions of lives throughout the galaxy will be at risk. As they prepared to board the specialized infiltration craft, alerts sounded throughout the complex. The Legion had arrived ahead of schedule, their massive fleet emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Hundreds of ships arranged in concentric rings around a central vessel of unprecedented size. Imperial defenses opened fire immediately, but the Legion ships absorbed the barrage with minimal damage. Their response was methodical and devastating, targeting power systems and command nodes with surgical precision. "We need a launch now," Valen ordered, watching as the first wave of Imperial capital ships reported critical failures. Their infiltration vessel was small and fast, designed with experimental stealth technology that the Legion would hopefully not have encountered before. As they launched from a secondary bay, while the main battle drew the Legion's attention, Freya took the pilot's controls with Rook beside her as co-pilot. Approaching optimal position for disruptor activation, she reported as they weaved through the chaos of the battle. Explosions bloomed in silence against the backdrop of space as Imperial and Legion vessels exchanged fire. In the command center on Capitolis, Dr. Chorus monitored their progress. "Disruptor systems ready," she confirmed via secure communication. "On your mark, General." Valen, standing behind Freya in the infiltration craft, gave the order. "Activate now." A pulse of invisible energy emanated from transmitters positioned throughout the Imperial defense network. For a breathless moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the Legion vessels began to drift out of formation, their coordinated attack patterns dissolving into disorganized movements. "It's working," Rook exclaimed. "Their neural network is disrupted." "We have 28 minutes, Valen reminded them. "Make for the command vessel." Freya piloted the infiltration craft toward the massive central ship that served as the Legion's command center. Without their coordinated defense, they were able to approach using the ongoing battle as cover. Accessing their docking protocols, Rook said, his fingers flying over the control panel. "Their systems are in disarray, but they'll recover soon. I need to gut it." A docking bay opened in the side of the command vessel, its automated systems responding to the spoofed identification signal Rook had generated. Freya guided their craft inside, finding the bay eerily empty of personnel. The drones require direction, Valen observed as they prepared to disembark. Without the neural network, they're reverting to basic functions. The interior of the Legion vessel was unlike any ship Freya had seen before. There were no distinct corridors or compartments. The entire structure seemed to flow organically, with technology integrated seamlessly into what almost appeared to be living tissue. "This way," Valen directed, following readings on a portable scanner. The energy signatures suggest their central processing unit is at the core of the vessel. They encountered scattered Legion soldiers as they progressed deeper into the ship, but the black-armored figures moved with hesitation, their actions uncoordinated and ineffective. The Special Forces team neutralized them efficiently, clearing a path toward the ship's center. 15 minutes remaining, Rook noted, checking the countdown on his device. "We need to move faster." As they approached the central chamber, resistance increased. Even without their neural network, the Legion soldiers seemed programmed to protect this area at all costs. The Special Forces team engaged them in close combat, creating an opening for Freya, Rook, and Valen to push forward. "Go!" the team leader shouted as he held position against advancing Legion forces. "We'll hold them here as long as we can." The central chamber, when they finally breached it, was a vast spherical space dominated by a pulsating core of energy contained within a transparent vessel. Surrounding it were hundreds of interface stations, each connected to the core by streams of light that flickered and wavered as the disruptor's effect continued to interfere with their operation. "That's it," Valen said, pointing to the core, the source of their collective consciousness. As they approached, a voice spoke, not aloud, but somehow directly into their minds. "You believe you have achieved victory," it said, the words carrying an alien cadence that made Freya's skin crawl. "But this is merely one note of many. The Veiled Legion exists beyond physical constraints. What are you? Fallen demanded. Why attack the Empire? We are evolution, the voice replied. Individual consciousness is inefficient, fractured, limited. We offer unity, purpose, perfection. You offer slavery, Freya countered. A primitive concept, the voice dismissed. Those who join our consciousness experience fulfillment beyond individual comprehension. The Empire's resistance is not merely futile. It denies its citizens' ascension. Rook had been examining the core's structure, identifying its vulnerabilities. General, I can overload this system, but it will trigger a cascade reaction. We'll have minutes at most to escape. Fallen nodded. Do it. As Rook worked to sabotage the core, the voice continued its eerie communication. Your disruption is temporary. Already we adapt. Already we evolve. What you destroy here will be reborn stronger. Maybe, Freya acknowledged. But today, the Empire stands. Rook completed his adjustments to the core, initiating an overload sequence that would destroy not just the physical structure, but the consciousness it contained. Done. We have 7 minutes before critical failure. They turned to retreat, only to find their path blocked by Legion soldiers who had begun to recover their coordination as the disruptor's effect weakened. This way, Valen called, identifying an alternative route on his scanner. They ran through twisting passages as the ship around them began to shudder, and alarms sounded in an alien harmony. The Special Forces team that had been covering their approach was gone, either retreated or eliminated. They were on their own, racing against both the ship's imminent destruction and the rapidly recovering Legion forces. For minutes, Rook warned as they navigated back toward the docking bay. The overload is accelerating faster than I calculated. They rounded a corner to find their infiltration craft still secure in the docking bay, but surrounded by Legion soldiers who were regaining their coordinated precision with each passing second. Cover me, Freya said, drawing her weapon. I can get the ship started remotely if I can reach that console. Valen and Rook provided covering fire as she darted toward a control panel near their vessel. The Legion soldiers returned fire with increasing accuracy, forcing them to take shelter behind cargo containers. 2 minutes. Rook called out. Freya reached the console and activated their ship systems, but as she turned to rejoin the others, a Legion blast caught her in the side, sending her sprawling to the deck. Valen saw her fall and broke cover, firing with precision as he made his way to her position. Rook, get to the ship. Rook hesitated only briefly before making a dash for the vessel, laying down suppressing fire as he moved. He reached the entry ramp and turned to provide cover for Valen, who was helping Freya to her feet. 1 minute. Rook shouted above the escalating sounds of the ship's systems failing. Valen half-carried Freya across the docking bay, dodging enemy fire with the skill of a veteran soldier. They had nearly reached the ship when a concentrated barrage forced them to shelter behind a final barrier. Go, Valen told Freya, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. I'll cover your retreat. General, she began to protest. That's an order, flight officer, he said with a hint of a smile. The Empire needs people like you, and Rook, now more than ever. People who question, who care about more than just power. Now, go. Before she could argue further, Valen moved from cover, firing with deadly accuracy to clear a path for her. Freya, despite her injury, made it to the ship where Rook pulled her aboard. Valen, she called out, but the general had no intention of following. He had positioned himself to hold back the Legion forces, buying them the time they needed to escape. 30 seconds, Rook warned as he took the pilot's controls. We have to go now. With agonizing reluctance, Freya sealed the hatch as Rook initiated launch procedures. The infiltration craft rose from the docking bay and accelerated away from the Legion command vessel, just as the core overload reached critical stage. The explosion was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Not just a physical detonation, but a release of energy that seemed to distort the fabric of space itself. The Legion command vessel collapsed inward before erupting in a sphere of brilliant light that engulfed the surrounding ships. Throughout the battlefield, Legion vessels suddenly lost coordination, their attacks faltering as the central consciousness that directed them was severed. Imperial forces, though badly damaged, seized the opportunity to press their advantage. As Rook navigated their small craft back toward Capitolese, they watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle shifted. Without their command structure, the Legion fleet began to scatter, individual vessels jumping to hyperspace or continuing to fight with diminished effectiveness. He knew he wasn't coming back, Freya said quietly, thinking of Valen's final moments. He knew from the beginning. He died believing in something greater than the Empire's power, Rook replied. He died believing in hope. Upon their return to Capitolese, they were greeted as heroes, though the celebration was tempered by the knowledge of how close they had come to defeat and how high the cost of victory had been. The Empire had lost nearly half its fleet, and thousands of soldiers had perished in the battle. In the days that followed, as Imperial forces pursued the remaining Legion vessels and secured the affected sectors, Freya, Rook, and Dr. Chorus were invited to address the High Council. It was an unprecedented honor for a deserter, a mechanic, and a scientist who had once abandoned Imperial service. The council chamber was subdued, the usual pomp and ceremony set aside in recognition of recent events. The surviving counselors listened in uncharacteristic silence as Dr. Chorus explained the nature of the threat they had faced and the likelihood that other Legion nodes existed beyond known space. The victory we achieved was significant, but possibly temporary, she concluded. The Legion's technology and approach to consciousness represent a fundamental challenge to our understanding of sentient existence. We must prepare for their return. When it was Freya's turn to speak, she found herself thinking of Valen, of his gradual recognition that the Empire's strength lay not in its weapons or its authority, but in the people it was meant to protect. The Veiled Legion targeted the Empire because it represents the dominant power structure in our galaxy, she said. But they also exposed its greatest weakness, isolation from the very worlds it claims to safeguard. The Outer Rim fell quickly not just because of the Legion's superior technology, but because many of those worlds felt no loyalty to an empire that had treated them as resources rather than citizens. A murmur of discontent rippled through the council at her words, but she continued undeterred. General Valen gave his life not just for the Empire as it exists, but for what it could become, a true protector of worlds, a force for stability that earns loyalty through respect rather than fear. If we are to survive the Legion's inevitable return, we must rebuild not just our fleet, but our relationship with the galaxy we claim to govern. In the aftermath of what came to be known as the Legion Crisis, changes began to take shape within the Empire. With much of the military leadership lost in the battle, new voices gained influence. Voices that echoed Valen's growing recognition that adaptation was necessary for survival. Imperial policy toward Outer Rim worlds shifted gradually, with increased autonomy granted to local governments and reduced resource quotas allowing colonies to prosper. The military, while rebuilding its strength, placed new emphasis on defensive technologies and communication systems that could detect and respond to Legion incursions. Freya's desertion charges were officially pardoned, and she was offered reinstatement at a higher rank, an offer she politely declined. Instead, she, Rook, and Dr. Chorus established an independent research and monitoring station on Valora Prime, combining their unique skills to develop early warning systems for Legion activity. 6 months after the Battle of Capitolese, as they watched the sunset from the station's observation deck, Rook voiced the question that had been on all their minds. Do you think he'll come back? Freya's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Yes, she said simply. The voice in their command center said it. What we destroyed was just one node. They're out there, adapting, evolving. But so are we, Dr. Chorus added, her expression determined. And unlike them, we evolve not by assimilation, but by embracing our differences, our individual perspectives. Rook nodded slowly. When they return, they won't face just the Empire. They'll face all of us, Outer Rim settlers, independent worlds, reformed imperial forces. United not because we're forced to be, but because we choose to be. As night fell fully over Valora Prime, bringing with it the full splendor of the galaxy's stars, Freya felt something she had almost forgotten during her years of self-imposed exile. A sense of purpose, a belonging. The Legion had sought to eliminate individuality in pursuit of perfection, but they had instead reminded humanity of its greatest strength, the power of individual hearts and minds, working together by choice rather than compulsion. Whatever came next, they would face it not as subjects or soldiers, but as people determined to forge their own destiny among the stars. And in that determination lay a power that no collective consciousness, however advanced, could ever truly comprehend.